is on. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, do we have any apologies or substitutions?
Yes, Convener. Apologies from Councillors Bell and Nicholl, with Councillors Devine and Fotheringham substituting respectively.
Okay, going to item number 2. Any declarations of interest? Lois.
Yeah, thanks, Councillor Whiteside. Yeah, a declaration in agenda item number 12, the procurement report. So I'll just, it's the last agenda item, so I'll just leave the meeting at that point.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Speed.
Convener, through you, I appreciate that the item is recommended exempt item, but can Councillor Speed just elaborate in terms of what the nature of our declaration is?
Yeah, it's it's a non-financial interest, and I have family members who use that service.
Thanks, Councillor Speed. Thanks, Convener.
Thank you. Okay, we shall move on to item 3, minute of the previous meeting. This committee agreed to approve as a correct record the minute. Thank you. Okay. Item 4 is the Capital Monitoring General Fund Capital Programme 2022-23. I would like to ask Ian if he wants to introduce the report. Mr. Lorimer.
Thank you, Convener. Good afternoon to members of the committee. Those members that have been on council prior to the election will be familiar with this type of report, but for new councillors, we bring what's called a budget monitoring report, usually to each cycle of policy and resources, one on capital budgets and one on revenue budgets, which is the next item. So this item 4 is relating to our capital monitoring for financial year 22-23. This is the first monitoring report you've seen for the year. It's based on August actual expenditure up to the end of August and a projection for the remainder of the financial year. At this stage, both in terms of the gross capital expenditure and net, there is very little movement in terms of the expected year-end position, and really only one area of variance that is reflected in section 5 of the report in relation to the Vibrant Communities and Sustainable Growth Directorate. So no major issues flagging up thus far, but I would I suppose caution in relation to that. We do know that because of inflation and other issues, some of those challenges may yet come to face us, but nothing flagging up thus far from this convener, and happy to take any questions.
Thank you. I've got a question from Councillor Devine.
It's a very brief question, Mr. Lorimer. It's on page 13 and number 19, renewal of play parks fund. Now, I didn't notice the £200,000 that was put into the budget in March for the play parks in Brecon and Forfar. So I was wondering where that might be. So is this the 108,000? Is this from the Scottish Government Play Parks Fund? And any idea when this is going to be decided on? That's all. Thanks, Convener.
For you, Convener. Yeah, thanks, Councillor Devine. Yeah, the 108. I have a feeling this came up somewhere before, Councillor Devine. I think the 108 is the additional funding from government, which is phased over a number of years. So I think that's what the 108 is in.
Ian, you've gone on mute.
Can you hear me now? Did you catch any of this? Any of what I said?
Yes,
not very much.
I caught the first bit of it, that this is 108,000 is Scottish Government money. It's phased over 2 or 3 years, I think you said.
Yeah, I think it might be over 5 years. I don't know why it went on to mute there. Yeah, so that's what that is. There was also discussion, as you said, Councillor Devine, at budget time around possible additional funding for play parks elsewhere. I'm not finding that quickly as I look through the capital plan, certainly not under the heading of play parks. So if you don't mind, I'll come back to you on that one.
That would be fine. Thanks very much.
Thank you. Councillor Gregg.
Thank you, Convener. Just a question with regards to the new Monifield High School. With that and the budget and things, how is that looking? Has there been any increases or decreases within the cost, and how is that going to look over the next few years as per this report?
Yep, again through you, Convener. Thanks, Councillor Gregg. Yeah, that significant capital project across the whole of the capital budget. There was a report came to council, I think it was just before the recess, in terms of the affordability of that project and the expected cost of that project. So we're now in the phase of developing the detailed designs, etc., and there will be a further report will come back early into the next calendar year, providing a full update in terms of the final cost and seeking a final sign off in relation to that. I don't have the detail in terms of how that further detailed work is progressing, but I do know that we will expect a report early next calendar year on it. So hope that helps.
Thank you. Councillor Duff.
Yeah, thanks, Convener. Really just going back to Councillor Devine's question, I note from the capital monitoring report that 108,000 is in fact flagged as 21-22 money. So that looks like something that's going to be rolled over from last year. That would be my reading of it. I'm sure we had a similar question last month or the last cycle at PNR. I can't for the life of me remember the answer. But that's just a comment from what I can see.
Thank you, Councillor Duff. I've got a question myself. It's around the timing of the reports, and I think we've probably raised this in the past. I know that things have moved on slightly since the figures in this report, because there's been another CPMG meeting since. Is there anything we can do about the timing so that it's as up to date as possible?
Yeah, thanks for that question, Convener. It is a tricky one. We would always seek to bring the most up-to-date information that we can to the committee. We always base our reporting based on the actuals to the end of a calendar month. It then takes a few days to produce the ledger, and it then takes a few more days to have the discussions with budget holders, etc. And sometimes the way that the committee cycles fall and the month-end cycles fall, it doesn't work terribly well. But we would always try to bring the most up-to-date information. There is quite a lead-in time, as you know, in terms of pre-meetings, etc. for committees. So that does make it a little bit challenging. But we have a timetable, and we always seek to make sure that we bring the latest information to the committee to try and avoid that circumstance that you've just mentioned. But some cycles it's not possible to do that.
Okay, thank you for that. Okay, we're asked to review and scrutinise the content of the report, and we're asked to note the significant further works required and underway to fully assess the financial effect of the pay deal proposals and the energy cap on the council's budget. We're asked to note the intention to bring a separate report.
Convener, sorry, that's the next report.
Oh my goodness, I'm ahead of myself. Beg your pardon, looking at the wrong recommendations here. We are asked to review and scrutinise this report. Does committee agree?
Agreed.
Thank you.
Agreed.
Right. I shall catch up with myself now, and we're on to the revenue monitoring 2022 to 23 and the renewal and repair fund position for 22-23. And I'll hand back over to Mr. Lorimer for this one.
Yeah, thanks again, Convener. Yeah, not a particularly good position reflected in this report. And I suppose we hear every day probably at the moment about the impact of rising food and fuel and energy prices. That's never out of the news or never far away out of the news. And the council, I mean, in reality, the council is in no way insulated from those wider issues in the economy. So our costs are rising at what I would call an unprecedented rate, really due to inflation, particularly around energy, fuel and pay. And that those inflationary impacts are compounding what was already a very difficult financial situation that the council faces. again, that's been well publicised, and there's some reports coming up in the next couple of weeks that will say more on that. So in this report, we're projecting a deficit of about £2.8 million overall by the end of the financial year on our general fund services. But as I've stated in the report, that excludes the effects of the 22-23 pay deals, and some of those are still being fully finalised, and we're still working through the final calculations in relation to that. Now, our best current estimate in relation to the impact of pay is about another 3.7 million of a deficit that will create. That's another significant issue. Changes in national insurance from November will reduce that a little bit, but we're still, as we say in the report, projecting about a 6 million deficit for the year, and that is on the assumption that the pay deal for teachers will be agreed based on the offer that has been made, but we know that offer has been rejected, so that 6 million is clearly at risk of rising further. So what I'm really saying at this stage is we think we have at least a £6 million projected problem, deficit, overspend, whichever word you want to refer to it as, by the end of this financial year. Now, Angus Council has never faced a projected in-year deficit on that scale. Once our budgets have been set, we've tended to live within those budgets. But a whole variety of circumstances, as I mentioned, are conspiring really this year to add significantly to our existing financial challenges. So these things couldn't really have come at a worse time. There are, as the report highlights, there are a number of what I would call ups and downs in budgets. Some areas are projecting an overspend, some are by year end. So, for example, in relation to energy costs, we're projecting pretty significant overspends in relation to that. But in relation to staffing costs, recruitment difficulties are meaning that we're projecting an underspend on our staff costs. So it's a bit of a mixed picture overall. Probably the most alarming area is the overspend in the Children, Families and Justice services, where there's been a large increase in the number of children requiring to be taken into care. And that's resulting in a projected overspend of more than £3 million in that one area. Now, as I've outlined in the report, the plan is to bring a separate report in the next cycle to the P&R committee to provide a full analysis on the costs and the funding of the pay deal, because it's complex. There's a number of different strands to it. So we'll bring a separate report in relation to that and what that all means. We will have to use our uncommitted reserves as a one-off solution to those additional pay costs. And so that will give us a solution for this year, but being able to afford those pay costs on an ongoing basis is a different and more significant challenge. We are taking some remedial action to try and address the projected overall overspend, but in some areas that is very difficult because of the council's statutory obligations, and we simply have to meet those. So yeah, it's a report. Normally these monitoring reports provide a more favourable sort of position, but this one clearly doesn't for the reasons that have been outlined in the report. Again, happy to take any questions, Convener.
Thank you very much, Mr. Lorimer. I mean, I don't think any of us here would underestimate the scale of the challenge that we face this year, and thanks for setting it out so clearly for us. We've got a few hands up. Councillor Wan.
Thank you, Convener. I've just got a couple of hopefully quick questions, and it's ones that I've probably asked Mr. Lorimer before. But the pay award costs, I think we initially thought it was going to be somewhere in the region of 2.8 million increase, and that's obviously gone up to about 3.7 on the end deal. I take it when you're saying we're 6 million overspend or deficit to come by the end of the year, this will be taken out of reserves, and could you just remind us what the reserve position was at the end of the year, just so we can tally that in our own heads? But really it's the COSLA position on this, you know, and challenging for more Scottish Government funding. What was our position at the leaders' COSLA meeting? Because I know, Councillor Whiteside, you were kind of a little bit perturbed by the Conservatives and the Labour sort of not agreeing to the original 5%, but really the council as it was can't afford this. And you know, whilst we all want everybody to get a fair increase in salary, you know, we really need to know what the council's position was. Was it as per our budget originally, which was given, I think it was about 2% or something like that. We were obviously wanting to increase that as much as we could, but we couldn't because of funding. So it was just really a couple of questions there on that, please. Thank you.
Was that from Mr. Lorimer?
Yeah, thanks, convener. Thanks, Councillor Warren. Yeah, there's probably a number of aspects of this that I would want to cover in that further report that I'm mentioning, and it's really for that reason, because there's so many different strands to it. We will have to cover the costs from reserves. Our uncommitted reserves at the end of last financial year were around £6.5 million. So the projected deficit that we have here is would more or less wipe out those uncommitted reserves. But I'd rather tell the story of pay, because there are, as I say, a number of different strands to it in that further report to come. So if you're okay to wait until we've got that report, Councillor Wan, we can perhaps have a further discussion at that point.
Sure, that's fine. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, convener. My question is with reference to on page 26 for licensing 4.10, and that the licensing is currently projecting a deficit of 0.034 million due to the anticipated loss of income. Is that taking into account the new short-term lets and the income that will be generated from that, or is that not including that?
Thank you. I wonder if Mrs. Buchanan could come in if she's with us.
Hello, convener. It's myself today, Alison Watson. I think that is not including the short-term lets income. I think that would be correct, Ian. It's not including that income, Councillor Gregg.
Thank you. Okay, we've got Councillor Fairweather.
Right, thank you, Chair. All I can say is right. Thank goodness that from the last administration there were reserves left. Can I just ask in recommendation 3? What they're saying is intention to bring a separate report regarding the implications. Now, our officers must already know what some of these implications are. Is this going to be redundancies? Is this going to be service cuts? Perhaps you can give us an idea now, so we don't have to wait any longer. Thank you.
Mr. Lorimer, would you like to come in there? I think you've already stated your preference for bringing a full report on the pay deal, but you might want to give Councillor Fairweather an answer.
Yeah, happy to clarify that one, Councillor Whiteside, for Councillor Fairweather. Yeah, so what I mean, Councillor Fairweather, by implications is really the financial implications. So what will the total cost of the pay deal be? What will our funding allocation, so there is some additional funding from government, be? How are we going to approach the additional financial implications for our partner organisations in relation to the pay deal? All of those things are the things I'm really talking about in terms of having to work those through. For the current year, what I'm saying is that we would use our reserves to meet the additional cost, but that pay deal creates an ongoing additional financial cost for the council, and we will have to find permanent funding solutions in order to be able to meet that. And those are effectively reflected in our projections for next year, which will come in a report on our medium-term budget strategy to council on the 3rd of November. So some of what happens next, I think, if I would put it that way, Councillor Fairweather, will be reflected in that report to council on the 3rd of November. That helps.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Cheap.
Yeah, thanks, convener. Just listening to what Ian Lorimer is saying, and having read through the papers, the extent of the variance on the children, families and justice did stand out considerably. Bearing in mind we're talking about an extra £3 million over budget here, and I know reading the papers that there is going to be a separate briefing arranged for this, but as Catherine Lindsay's on the call, I wonder if Catherine would mind giving us a very brief insight, but a bit more than is just there in the paragraph of 4.4, explaining a bit more about this 15% increase. I think it's quite important. It's such a sizable figure.
Thank you. Would you like to come in, Catherine?
I'm happy to do so, convener. Thank you for the opportunity. Yes, this is I think the first year of my tenure that we have experienced such a significant projected overspend at this point in the year. I suppose to provide some marginal degree of assurance to members, this budget often fluctuates quite significantly throughout the year, and we do undertake a significant amount of work to refine projections, although of course they fluctuate on a day-by-day basis depending on which children and young people come into our attention, require some sort of provision away from home. And the reality is that both the demand for placements at the moment across the whole country, our internal capacity and the cost of provision is problematic. So at the moment, there are insufficient placements across the country to meet the demand that we are seeing. And that, together with inflationary increases across all external providers, are driving up costs significantly. So wherever possible, our teams will look to hold responsibility for keeping children local. So we want to keep children in Angus wherever possible, ideally in placements that are delivered directly by Angus Council staff or Angus Council foster carers. However, increasingly we have experienced periods of time during this year and at the very end of the last financial year where there was just no internal capacity. And what that does is it pushes our search for suitable accommodation for children and young people to the external market. And that's where we see the more wild fluctuation in costs that are driving this significant overspend at this point in the year. We will continue to monitor that very closely, but obviously if we've got children and young people in relation to whom we've got a requirement either to keep them safe in the immediate term or to provide accommodation in the longer term, then these are placements that we need to continue to honour. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Clearly a very difficult. Thank you for that. Councillor McLaren.
Yeah, thank you, Convener. On page 28, 4.16, I've concerns regarding the housing revenue account, and my main concern is the loss of rental income from void properties. What procedures have been put in place to help rectify this situation? Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor McLaren. Is there anybody from the housing team with us today that would like to answer that, or Mr. Lorimer, do you have any insights into that?
If there's nobody from housing, Convener, I'm happy to relay that on to colleagues in housing and to provide a note or a briefing to Councillor McLaren to explain what specific actions have been done. I don't have that detail, I'm afraid.
Okay, I think from discussions with the administration, there are measures in place to concentrate on work on void properties to ensure that we get them back into use as soon as possible. But a briefing note would be really useful. Thank you. Okay, Councillor Gregg.
Thank you, Convener. Two questions, if I may. The first one, again, with regards to the increase in utility bills, electricity, gas and things like that, and obviously with the council now operating their agile work styles and things like that, what more can be done to help reduce the costs in buildings, whether that be completely shut them down and relocate staff to more appropriate buildings or things like that? And a second question is to do with staff slippage. I notice in a few parts of this report and there's a lot of mention of staff slippage. So that to me means, or presumes to me to mean people leaving to go and work somewhere else or to go and work for another council or move to the private sector, which obviously has a knock-on effect. The biggest impact for me would be for housing. I know that we're very short of housing officers and the housing staff. The majority of the complaints that I get from residents are with regards to housing. So what is being done to try and recruit staff? Is that to do with the wages? Is it to do with the terms and condition? And what is the effect on the people in those departments where they are short-staffed and their workloads are increasing?
Thanks, Councillor Gregg. Like the last question, I don't think we've got anybody from housing here. specifically to answer some of the questions. Perhaps somebody could come in on the asset aspect of the question. Mr. Balfour, perhaps?
Yeah, thanks, convener. Just getting my camera off there. So yes, in terms of saving energy going forward, what we're doing within the council at the moment is reviewing our building heating policy. We're also looking at, as councillor suggested, keeping our staff in particular areas in the building. If you've been in Angus House recently, we're tending to use the ground floor east wing at the moment, and using that, filling that up before we move to any other floors, and not heating the remainder of the building. And also we've got written a note down here, but I can't read my writing. We'll potentially come back to you on that one. My apologies.
Thank you.
Yes, we are actively looking to reduce our costs. Oh, that was it. Looking at buildings that external lighting in the evenings, all those kind of things. We're actively looking at trying to track down any buildings where we're using energy unnecessarily. So that's an exercise that's ongoing at the moment.
Thank you very much. That's helpful. Mrs. Williamson's got her hand up.
Yeah, thanks, convener. I was just going to pick up on the point about staff and about vacancies and staff slippage. I guess to give you some assurance, we're looking at this in a really intensive way. We're looking at it in terms of any vacancies we have and how long we can hold them, largely because we do not want to be employing people and then be in a situation where we're going to have to let people go. So we want to make sure that we protect as many of our current staff as possible. Well aware that some staff in some areas, because of vacancies, they're under a lot of pressure in terms of picking up workload. So again, we're looking at that in terms of, is there anything we could stop doing or do in a bit more efficient way? Staff is something we're spending a good bit of time on at the moment, largely because we know what's coming in terms of our financial situation, but also we want to be a good employer and make sure we protect and help people as much as we can. So at this stage, all I can do is really give you the assurance that the corporate leadership team are looking at this incredibly closely. We will bring forward the council plan alongside a workforce plan, which will show members what we're aiming to achieve over the next 3 years when we do that. So hopefully that's helpful for now. I know it doesn't give you a clear answer, but please be aware that we are conscious of pressures, we're conscious of vacancies and what it means in terms of service delivery, but we're also looking at, can we deliver services slightly differently?
Thank you.
Thank you, that's helpful. Okay, I don't see any more hands, so I'll go on for and apologies for the repetition here. Oh, Lynn's waving. Lynn, you're on mute.
I don't have a question, it's a comment really. I just want to give more maybe reassurance to Councillor Cheap on his question about the overspend. We are having this briefing and I really do appreciate it because this is something right across Scotland, if indeed not across the UK. But there are contingency plans being looked at, and this briefing will give us an opportunity to explore these. So I hope as many people can come to that as possible. It would be very important to hear that. And I think maybe for Councillor Gregg, I mean, he's a new councillor and hasn't been involved in all the agile working stuff that has been going through for several years now. We have closed council buildings and we have been moving people around the place to different areas, just to save the costs on sometimes older buildings, which are very difficult to heat. Thank you. Convener.
Thank you, Councillor Devine. And
yeah, thanks, convener. Mine was a comment, and I was waiting for the questions to finish. Yeah, I would maybe make a couple of comments. I think Mr. Lorimer has actually covered almost everything that I wanted to say. I guess in terms of the recommendation, I think recommendation 4 talks about decommitting resources to assist in dealing with inflationary pressures, and there's a report coming on that, and that's obviously important in terms of funding things going forward. I mean, Mr. Lorimer has mentioned that we have about 6.5 million of uncommitted reserves. And perhaps if I could be permitted to comment about Councillor Fairweather's remark about the size of the reserves. Both alternative SNP budgets in 21 and 22 used less reserves than the administration budget. So if either of those budgets had been approved instead of the administration budget, there would be significantly more reserves left. I seem to remember quite a lot of money being pushed into road repairs in the 22 budget, which came from reserves. So I think you know, the reserves are what they are, but they could have been larger if the previous administration had taken a more responsible position, particularly in 22, when the financial position was much clearer in terms of how bad it was going to be. I also remember discussion at the 22 budget in the amount of money we should put aside for pay inflation, and my recollection is the administration put the minimum amount forward there. That was a fairly optimistic point of view.
Point of clarification, right, Chair.
Go ahead.
Right, just to clarify, the I don't want to get into political point scoring here, but at the end of the day, the fiscal responsibility from the previous administration was well documented in the best value audit report, and perhaps Councillor Duff should go back and look at that. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Fairweather. I don't think there was anything that needed clarifying from what Councillor Duff said, actually. Councillor Brays.
Yes, thanks. It's just a comment regarding, I suppose, Councillor McLaren's question about voids, and professional officers are going to respond to him. But the issue of voids, we are experiencing at Angus Council a higher level of voids than we would normally anticipate. This seems to be common across local authorities and indeed housing associations too. Part of that is because of the issue of meter debt. When tenants leave a property, they might leave debt on the utility meters, and it's quite complicated getting these houses relet until that debt is paid off. So that there are reasons for this, and it is being addressed. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Brays. Do we have any more comments? Okay, we'll move on to recommendations again. Committee agreed to review and scrutinise the content of the report.
You've gone on to mute.
I've gone on to mute, sorry about that. So we can review and scrutinise the content of the report, note that significant further works required to assess the financial effect of the pay deal and the energy cap impact. Note the intention to bring a separate report on the implications of the pay deal proposals, and note the intention to bring a report in the next cycle seeking approval to decommit resources. Finally, we're asked to note the renewal and repair fund position. Does committee agree?
Agreed.
Thank you. Okie doke. We'll move now on to item 6, the Glen Clover project evaluation. A really positive report, a really encouraging report, and I'd like to comment that the independent evaluation was really well written and really easy to read, and I thank everyone for that. Catherine, would you like to introduce this report?
Yes, thank you. Just one moment. Sorry, colleagues, I think my machine is working at a very, very slow pace today. Here I am. So I'm delighted to bring this report, and I've actually got a couple of colleagues on the call who might also be able to take some question on the detail if there are any questions to follow up. I think it's quite significant to highlight the connection between the Glen Clover project and the interventions that are delivered, and the conversation that we have just had about budget and budget pressures, because these two things are in some ways interlinked. We would have seen a more significant overspend, I think, in relation to our accommodation of children and young people had it not been for the small-scale intervention that we were able to offer through the Glen Clover project during this really difficult period of time for children, for families and for individuals in Angus and beyond. And I think that the report is very straightforward, although there's obviously quite a lot of complexity lies beneath in terms of what it is the service actually does deliver. But I'm really pleased to see the outcomes that the women are telling us that they have enjoyed as a result of their work with the Glen Clover project, and of course the knock-on impact in terms of the efficiency and effectiveness of a range of services beyond just the council's boundary in terms of service delivery, keeping appointments, etc. And we've seen obviously some direct service cost benefits as well. So I think overall it has been a successful project in terms of that pilot period, and I'm very pleased that we were able to extend it until we had at least this evaluation for members to consider in more detail. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I see a few hands there, so I'll ask for questions now. Councillor Braze.
Yes, thanks, convener. My question is regarding recommendation 2 here, where we're asked to instruct Director of Children, Families and Justice to develop costed proposals. When would we expect those proposals to be available to us?
Thank you very much, Councillor Braze. So I do like to be instructed, as members will know. There's a clarity around the language there. The reason that we've worded it in this way, and obviously recommendation 3 as well, is really to highlight that this has been a pilot project. There's learning to be had from the pilot. And what we would now like the opportunity to do within the service and with colleagues more widely is to look at how we can best embed the learning from the project, and that might mean different configurations of financial support that are required both from the council and from elsewhere. And so the ideal scenario would be that we would develop some proposals through PBSG and use the wider budget setting kind of process to work that through. And so the final kind of ask, if you like, in terms of any budget going forward would come through the council's ordinary budget setting process. That's certainly the proposal that's here. That's what those recommendations are really pointing to.
Okay, thanks, Catherine. But I think that basically the sooner we can have that information, the better in the PBSG. Thanks.
Thank you. Okay, Councillor Wan.
Thank you, convener. Question for Catherine, actually. But this, as everybody's aware, this is something we've supported all the way through, and it would be good to see it continuing. But as we've seen in the reports 2 before this, we do have budget restraints ahead of us. But it is a very important service. My question, Catherine, to yourself is: are we actually asking the Scottish Prison Service, or are they already funding something towards this? Because this must be providing them with a good saving in the fact that we're managing to, keep women and children away from their services. So is that being investigated?
Thanks very much, Councillor Wan, both for the support for the project and your comments. In terms of the Scottish Prison Service benefits, what we do have is a sister project, the Glen Isla project, which predated the Glen Clover project and was ultimately the model on which we based Glen Clover. Now, that's funded through justice monies, so that comes from Scottish Government ring-fenced monies for justice social work, and that in and of itself was top sliced from arguably top slice from SPS budgets a number of years ago now. So whilst the SPS don't specifically fund the Glen Clover project, and I would suggest it's quite unlikely that they would, given that this is more of a children's and community service probably than a justice service in and of itself. But they certainly have, whether they intended to directly or not, had some money shifted from that kind of side of things to the community justice budget. That was a number of years ago. I don't know whether or not Alison Hendry would like to make any additional comment on that.
Hello, everybody. No, I don't think so. I think that kind of answers the question. I think we've received quite a bit of additional money from the Scottish Government for justice services, and certainly the Glen Isla project massively support the Glen Clover project at the moment. You know, we've had to use some of the reserves from that, so it's kind of come full circle, really.
Thank you for that. Councillor Greig.
Thank you, convener. I too welcome this report. It's such a good read, and it goes to show how much work has been done and the substantial decreases in service use going forward, which has obviously been a massive cost saving for us as a council as well. But also with all the fantastic work that's done to help and support these women and also their children and families as well. It may be a pilot, but it's definitely something that I would like to see continuing on. Yes, there are budgetary issues and things all over the council for every department, but for something like this that really works so well and generates long-term savings across a whole range of different services, I would like to definitely see this continue. Welcome this report. I think it's fantastic. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Greig. I absolutely agree with you there. Councillor.
Thanks, convener. Yeah, I mean, you've covered a lot there, Councillor Greig. And Councillor Bell, of course, is very sorry she's not here today, and she did want me to say a few words. I mean, the evaluation of the project by such a well-respected criminologist and researcher is superb. Really appreciating and understanding the impact this service makes to women and children who are in extremely difficult circumstances in a practical and tangible way allows us to consider this at a strategic level. This project was underpinned by Councillor Bell's gender-based violence motion, which Council approved unanimously, and those in the subgroup were very clear that this was a spend to save initiative, and you've already said that, Councillor Greig. It can help tremendously in other areas, obviously out with the council through the police and things like that, but within the council as well. So yes, we really do need to try and find whatever money. The question that we was going to ask has actually been answered, because it was, you know, is this going to be mainstream funding? Is it going to be drawing in partnership money or external funding? Well, we'll find out as soon as we can, hopefully. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Twine. Councillor Cheap.
Just very briefly, convener. I don't want you to say was it indifferent. That's wrong. I was unsure about when this was set up and what the outcomes it might be. But having read the report, and I echo what Councillor Devine and Councillor Greig just said, the quality of the report was excellent. And coming to its conclusion at the end, showing the comparisons, you know, before the study and after the study, and the net benefits of it. I'm absolutely convinced of its benefits, and would like to see it continue as well.
Thank you. Councillor Fairweather.
Right. Thank you, Chair. Right, a lot's already been said. But when the project first came forward, and I'm going to give my thanks to Catherine Lindsay here, who brought it to the previous administration very passionately, and I am absolutely delighted that she got 100% backing right from all the administration at that time, and this is taking this forward. But can I also thank, just today looking at the report, I'd like to thank Dr. Nugent, but can I also thank Kirsty Lee for the summary. And as others have already said, if we can continue with this, it's well, to me it's a must, and let's all work together to make sure this can happen. Thank you, and continue. Bye.
Thank you. That was a comment. Do we have any further comments before we move to recommendations? Councillor Brays.
Well, I would just echo what pretty much everyone else has said about this report and about this pilot project. But I would like to draw attention to something at the top, near the top of page 56, where say this could be used as a template for a service developed for men. And while it's right that we focus so much attention on women and use of them, I think it's important that we do recognise that there is also a problem with men who suffer abuse. And only the tip of the iceberg has been identified. And so I find it quite encouraging that it's clearly on the radar that's mentioned in this report. Thanks.
Thanks, Councillor Brace. I don't know whether Kirsty or Catherine would like to come in response to that.
Yes, happy to do so. I mean, I think it's very helpful, Councillor Brace, that you picked up on that point. And just by way of assurance, the Justice Service in Angus sees the Glen Clover project and the learning from the Glen Clover project in part about a gendered understanding of what helps, but actually probably more strongly underpinned by an ethos of trauma-informed practice, which Alison Hendry, who's on the call here, has been instrumental in supporting the rollout of both trauma-informed approaches and the Glen Clover and Glen Isla projects. It would be well able to talk to you at great length about. But that trauma-informed relationship-based model of intervening, whether it's within a social work service or whether it's more broadly within support services, actually critical in terms of being able to help people to access services, whether that be when they phone the access line within the council and they're asking us a fairly straightforward question. You know, it's about how we reach out and engage with people and help them to resolve issues within their life alongside them and on their behalf. And it's about culture as well as about particular services. And I'm very pleased that Sharon Faulkner, the Director of HR, IT, OD, etc., is also leading on the Council's approach to trauma-informed practice. And this learning and understanding is being cascaded much more widely than just within the project itself. So I hope that gives you some sense of the kind of reach of the learning that's coming from these sorts of pilot projects.
Absolutely, and thank you very much.
Thanks, Catherine, and thanks to everybody involved in the project. I'd just like to reinforce my opinion there. Okay, we'd move on to the recommendations, and we're asked to consider the findings of the independent evaluation report. We're asked to instruct the Director of Children, Families and Justice to develop costed proposals, and we're asked to note any proposal to extend additional council funding beyond the current financial year will be addressed through the budget process. Does committee agree?
Agreed.
Agreed. Thank you. Okay, next report item number 7 on the agenda is Justice Social Work Shared Services, and we will go back to Catherine for this one. Thank you.
Thank you very much again, convener. It's been some time, I think, since you've had a report at this committee in relation to the work that the Justice Service undertakes on a PANTE side or joint basis with colleagues in Dundee City Council and also Perth and Ross Council. So this report really is an update and is looking for sign-off by committee members that we continue to pursue these collaborative and joint service provisions, both because they give us the necessary resilience around some of these highly specialist functions, but also offer an opportunity to develop some efficiencies of scale. This is not the only opportunity that we have, as you will know, working pan-Tayside and in partnership with other authorities, but this is a very long-standing and, in my view, very successful method of delivering these services. So really looking for your continued support there. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And you know, it's another illustration approach can bring us really good benefits. It's another very encouraging report. Are there any questions? I'm not seeing any hands there. Any comments on the report? No comments at the moment, so we'll move straight on to the recommendations. We're asked to approve the payments to Dundee City Council, to delegate authority to the Director of Children, Families and Justice to execute the agreement. We're asked to endorse proposals to continue to pursue partnership approaches, to note the partnership arrangement in place for the delivery of a custody assessment and referral service pilot project, and to note the intent of the Angus Council Justice Social Work Service to apply to become a Caledonian System Delivery Site. Is the report agreed?
Agreed.
Thank you. Okay, we move on to item 8, which is the Regulation of Investigatory Powers Scotland Act 2000 Annual Report. And I ask Mrs Buchanan to present the report.
Thank you, convener.
Oh, sorry, Alison, it's yourself.
It's okay. It's okay, thanks. So this report relates to the Council's policies on the use of covert surveillance, and guidance from the Investigatory Powers Commissioner states that an annual review of such policies should be undertaken. So as committee will note from the report, this review has been undertaken and officers are satisfied that no amendments are required at this time. So committee is therefore asked to note that this review has taken place, to agree that no changes are required, and also there's a request to delegate authority to the Director of Legal and Democratic to make any minor amendments that are required. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Are there any questions? No questions. Any comments? Councillor Devine.
Sorry, it seems to be very slow today, convener. I've just got a very short question on page 84, top of 84. It says community housing team officers investigating complaints of antisocial behaviour such as noise emanating from neighbouring properties. I was wondering if this is used very often. I've come across quite a few situations where it would be helpful to get corroboration for people because they haven't, you know, neighbours haven't been willing to come forward or they haven't wanted to come forward. So do you find it's used a lot? Or, well, I know it's not used a lot. Is it used at all, in fact?
Thank you, Councillor Devine. You'll probably be aware that this is the usage of this is reported to Scrutiny and Audit Committee quarterly, and the reports that you'll have been having for the past year or so will have said that there haven't been any authorisations, but it certainly is a tool that's available to the community housing team to use where they feel it's appropriate, and they will do that where they deem it to be so. But as you say, it hasn't been used very much recently, but it is certainly available as an option.
Thank you. Councillor Gregg.
Thank you, convener. Just off the back of Councillor Devine's question there, with regards to usage, with it not being used, I mean, I know, and Councillor Devine will be aware of some of the issues that we have in a couple of our housing estates in Forfar. So is the reason that this perhaps has not been used, is it because there's a cost element to it and that's being as a negative towards using it, or they haven't used it because the housing officers just felt that it isn't necessary, or it's going a bit too far?
I don't know the answer to that, Councillor Gregg, I'm afraid, but certainly can again get a housing colleague to feed back with their response on that, if that would be helpful.
Thank you. Councillor Duff.
Yeah, I mean, I have asked, and this is very occasionally, in my knowledge, when there's been a neighbour dispute or there's antisocial behaviour, they have used recording equipment to sort of get evidence against potential neighbours where there's complaints. I have certainly known it's been done in cases which I was dealing with, but certainly not very often. Maybe once, twice in the last 10 years, I would think. So it's certainly, I know it's done, but there's clearly a lot of there needs to be a serious case, and it needs to be justified, etc. But I've certainly had some experience. I don't think it resolved the issue from memory, but that's by the by.
Thank you, Councillor Duff. Okay, no more questions that I can see. Have we got any comments? No comments. The recommendations have been summarised helpfully by Alison. Do we agree with the report?
Agreed.
Thank you. Okay, next one is the annual procurement report. So there's quite a significant amount of information in this and quite a lot of changes happening in the procurement service. Councillor Wan, was this report, or was that a late hand? Oh, you're on mute.
Sorry, it was a wrong hand.
Okay, thank you. So presumably, are you going to introduce this report as well?
Yes, thank you, Convener. So this report presents the Council's statutory annual procurement report, which is required under the Procurement Reform Act, and it recommends that the annual report is published and the return made to Scottish ministers. So the report has some key themes which have been identified in the covering report. And just to highlight some of these, the Council's local spend has risen to over a third, which is a good achievement for a local authority of Angus's size and our geographical location. And this has been achieved through close working with economic development colleagues and other colleagues across the Council, supporting and driving the ambition to spend locally in a compliant manner, and also through supplier development, engaging with the marketplace and enabling quick quotes for smaller contracts to be awarded locally. The Council is also working closely with our neighbours, Perth and Kinross and Dundee City Councils, to develop a model for a more planned and targeted approach to efficiencies realisation, which is ever more important given the budget pressures we've been speaking about. And also, as members agreed in August, the procurement and commissioning team is focusing on a planned programme of education, so training across the Council, enablement by providing information and documentation to colleagues, and also efficiencies with a focus on savings from third-party spend. I'm happy to take any questions, and we also have our procurement and commissioning manager, Alison Gallagher, on in the meeting today. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Alison. I've got a couple of hands here. Councillor Wan.
Thank you, Convener. Thank you, Alison. Obviously, it's a delight to see that our local spend has gone up to a third. And really, I would just like to ask, will that be an easy achievement to go further than 33%, or certainly a third of this council spend? And is that something that you're looking at with Perth and Dundee? So we class it as a Tayside spend or an Angus spend? So I'd like clarification on that as well, please. Thank you.
Certainly on the first part of the question, Councillor Wan, we are looking at that, developing our relationships with local suppliers through supplier engagement and development. On the second part of your question, how we classify that across Tayside, if Alison is on the call, I think she is, I'll maybe bring in Alison Gallagher to answer that from a sort of Tayside perspective. Thank you.
Thank you, Alison Watson. Yes, absolutely. We are looking to expand our local spend. That is a key objective going forward. How we define local, we have no plans to change that at present. We are continuing to work with our colleagues and peers across neighbouring authorities and Tayside and beyond also. But for this moment in time, for the foreseeable future, we're still looking to classify local as within the Angus region. absolutely, the figure we have at the moment is really great, to be quite honest, especially considering the national average. Obviously, something we're looking to expand and build on. There are potential risks associated with having such a good figure at the moment, but the report does also identify some potential opportunities, mainly from the use of the quick quote facility and the ability that gives us to ring fence to local suppliers as well. So I think as part of our ongoing education programme, that is our main area of focus for building upon that.
Can I just thank you, Alison, for that confirmation there, and also just I know this will be the delight of our former councillor colleague Angus McMillan-Douglas is listening in, because this was something that was very close to his heart, that we try and increase the spend in Angus. So thank you very much for that.
Thank you, Councillor Devine.
Thanks, convener. Yeah, I wonder if you're working with businesses, especially small and medium-sized businesses. Are you stressing the point about payments? Because I know that we're really quite good at paying quickly. Ian Lorimer has said this for a long time, that they have really strived to make sure that small and medium-sized businesses are paid very quickly. But I think there's still a bit of race memory going on here, where they didn't want to work with the council because they thought they were paid slowly. So could I ask perhaps that is really up there with your recommendations to them, just to help them understand the situation? Thank you.
Alison, do you want to come in on that one?
Of course, yes.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Devine. Absolutely. Prompt payment is one of the tools really we do have within the council's arsenal to support the local marketplace. And yes, it's something we do advocate quite strongly. As the local authority, I think we're all aware that we're perhaps not the highest payers. We do obviously have the competitive position to make sure we are getting best value, but the trade-off against that is, yes, you will get paid quickly and you will get paid. Full stop, which within the private sector is not always a guarantee. So absolutely, that is something we do reinforce. But thank you for bringing that to attention again.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Cowdy.
Thank you, convener. Yeah, I just wanted to just check on something in point 4.2, just to read off the report. There are a number of approved posts within the procurement team using the existing budget, which will soon be taken to market. And it goes on to explain that you'll get efficiency savings from that, basically. I just wonder, I'm really pleased. That sounds like a really positive move, but obviously with budgets being so rightly scrutinised, do you think in the future that might be able to be quantifiable, the sort of savings that you've made relative to the extra posts that are being brought into the team?
Is it okay to come in, Alison, on that one? Thank you, Councillor Cowdy. Absolutely. I think I'd be naive if I didn't think I needed to be quantifiable across the team to demonstrate savings that I could bring. Whilst the savings department the procurement department don't spend anything ourselves other than resources, we're looking at saving other aspects of the council services and increasing efficiencies, but we need to demonstrate efficiencies ourselves absolutely from it. There are perhaps some areas, and apologies, I don't really like this phrase, of low-hanging fruit. They're easy targets for the initial period, and that's why some of these roles are only short-term as opposed to longer-term permanent posts. But once we get past that, absolutely everything within the procurement department has to be defendable and justifiable, just as everywhere else in the council.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Greig.
Thank you, convener. Mine is a comment rather than a question, if you're happy to take that.
Yeah, I don't see any further hands, so go ahead.
Thank you. I just wanted to commend this report. I think it's great to see that the council are using up to a third of local businesses for their procurement. I always encourage people to shop locally, because by shopping locally, you're helping boost your local businesses, which in turn helps your local economy. And it's great to be able to see the council doing that. I'd also welcome the idea that this goes beyond the 33%. And if we can set a target of at least half, then that's fantastic, and something that Angus Council should be shouting from its rooftops.
Thank you. Councillor Fairweather.
Thank you, convener. But just very quickly, just as Councillor Vaughan has, I would like to thank Councillor McMillan-Douglas. He was a financial convener, and he was also the deputy leader. he was so robust, right, in getting there for local businesses and them being a priority in Angus. And I'm sure that Ian Lorimer and our chief executive had burning ears on many occasions. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Durno.
That's Convener. I just want to say I'm glad that we're looking to engage with the more of the local suppliers, and I look forward to working alongside the new data officer and the community benefit and sustainable officer on the local community projects. Obviously, this is money that we should have had in the last administration that wasn't brought forward, and the new community money will be well spent in Angus. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Brays.
Yes, it's just going back, I think, to Councillor Wan's question about Dundee and P&K as well, and also Alison's comment about what is local. Well, if you're in Montrose here, Aberdeenshire is more local to us than Dundee or P&K. A lot of the people living in South Aberdeenshire, right way up to Inverbervie and beyond, they use Montrose for their entertainment, for their nights out, for their shopping. And, I think that we really need to be thinking about that, a bit about that too, because, if we're awarding contracts to businesses based in that area, then they and their staff are more likely to spend some of that money in the north of Angus. So it's just something to be considered. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Brays. Good point. Do we have any further comments? No? Okay, we move to recommendations. We're asked to approve the annual report, authorise the Director of Legal and Democratic Services to publish the report and provide the necessary return, and note the current position in terms of staff recruitment and future key targets. Is the report agreed?
Agreed.
Thank you. Okay, item 10, the possible exclusion of public and press. The committee will be asked to consider in terms of Standing Order 28.2 whether the public and press should be excluded during consideration of the following items so as to avoid the disclosure of information which is exempt in terms of Part 1 of Schedule 7A to the Local Government Scotland Act 1973. Is that agreed?
Agreed.
Thank you.
Through you, Convener, could we just confirm that the live stream